Alright there, would you believe it's been 8 months now since I reviewed this Sony HT-A7000 soundbar. Now, at the time I bought this, I had a bit of a blowout because as well as the soundbar, I got the wireless subwoofer, the larger one of the two, the SW5, and the wireless rear surrounds, the RS3Ss. Now it's already time for an upgrade. Now I'm not replacing the entire lot this time. In fact, I'm just swapping out the rears for the new RS5s. Now I'll explain why I'm doing that in a minute. But as well as that, in this video, I also want to talk about the experience of having this for all this time, what I think of it up to this point, because a lot of the reviews that have come out of this soundbar and also of this speaker, which a load of them predate my look at it today, they've been sponsored reviews. They've also come from the US, where rooms tend to be a little bit larger in size. So I'm doing this from a UK perspective of someone who bought these things and also someone in a little tiny room. Do they make any difference? Is there any point getting the RS5 over the RS3Ss? Well, I hope to tell you that once I've set it all up. Okay, so I think you can see where the surrounds are in relation to where I'm sitting. Those are the RS3Ss. They performed faultlessly, never cut out once, always reconnect when the thing is switched on. No issues with them whatsoever. So why am I replacing them? Well, when I shot the original video review, I said this. Now, one thing with this setup though, there are some Dolby Atmos wireless systems. I think there's one from LG, and they've got 2 rear upfirers in addition to the 2 front ones on that. And I wish this system had had those, because then I could have just ticked that off and said, right, well, I've got everything I need. The fact that it's missing them makes me think, I wonder if it would be any better if it had those. Now, when I said that, I was resigned to the fact that the system couldn't be changed in any way. I assumed I was always going to have it with this speaker layout. I thought that it must be driving all the different speakers it can handle. It's a 7.1.2 system. So that's a centre channel, left and right, beamformers for the left and right mids, so that's 5, rears 7, and then 0.1 is the sub, and then 0.2 are the Atmos upfirers at the front. So that's 7.1.2. I thought, well, that's all it can do. Little did I know, Sony was working on these, the RS5s, a bit cheeky really, well, more than a bit. And these, as well as having your normal 2 at the back, have 2 upfirers in them. So even though it's all connected wirelessly still, we've now got like 4 channels at the back, whereas we had 2 before. So it becomes a 7.1.4 system. Now, recently Sony did a firmware update in preparation for these with different 360-degree mapping. You get this like sphere of audio all around you. These things were announced in January 22, and I kept checking the Sony site because it said coming soon, and it still says coming soon in the UK on the Sony site. I got these from an independent retailer. So I think I've got these quite early for someone in the UK, but as far as worldwide goes, I'm really quite slow because there were people in the US reviewing them perhaps a couple of months ago. But anyway, yeah, I'm doing it from a UK perspective because, as you can see, not the largest of rooms, hence why I put a soundbar in here, more on that later. But let's open these up, let's get it out, let's have a look what we've got, and then we'll get it all set up. And I want to see if I can do a bit of a comparison between what I've got now and with these, and see if I notice any magical difference up here. Probably quite unlikely, but since I bought them, I'm going to be using them. So let's get on with it. I don't know if you've ever noticed that whenever a manufacturer shows any product with wireless speakers, you always get that person that says, well, actually, they're not really wireless because actually they have to be plugged into power, actually. Well, they can actually shut their face this time because the RS5s can be used completely wirelessly once they're charged up, as they contain a battery which will give them power for up to 10 hours. A full charge takes 4 hours, and a 10-minute charge will power them for 90 minutes. Or you can just leave them plugged in, which is what I'm going to be doing. Oh, and I suppose I should mention these speakers are only accessories for a couple of soundbars in Sony's range. They don't do anything on their own. One difference from the SA-RS3Ss is that those had an internal power adapter, whereas the SA-RS5 uses a chunky external wall wart. And you can see that Sony would just swap out the connector on the end of this depending upon where in the world it was sold. Of course, there's 2 of these, there's one for each speaker, and they output 12 volts, 3.8 amps. Now, some might find the cable length on these a little bit short. It's only 2 meters long, and I'm going to need to plug mine into an extension lead in order for it to reach the wall socket. The speaker sides are a plastic mesh that's covered with cloth, and that might prove to be a bit of a dust trap in time. But on the base we've got a power socket and a link button, and then there's a secret hatch. Well, it's not that secret, but let's see what's underneath there. Well, it's nothing that I can use. There's a couple of sockets in there, no doubt, for diagnostics or whatever, but there you go. Notice that the correct location for each speaker is printed on the bottom, and also that serial number really looks quite low. Perhaps it's only the 319th one produced for this region. And the left speaker shares the same serial number, so these are a matched pair. Now, around the base there's a rubber ring, and the overall speakers just have a good weight and solidity to them, a nice feel. The Sony badge is placed only on one side at the top, and under another panel on the back you can find the wall mounting options, which are a screw thread and a picture hook hole, and these speakers are happy to be placed flat against a wall. The only other thing in the box other than the instruction sheet are two pieces of oddly shaped plastic, and the idea with these is that if you plan on permanently attaching the power cable to the speakers like I'm doing, they'll let you store the ferrite core in the recess at the bottom for a neater finish. Now on the top are two buttons, one for power, the other one to initiate a quick re-optimization of the sound mapping if you'd moved the speaker location. You can see the Atmos upfiring speaker behind the metal mesh on the top, but the other drivers on the side aren't as easy to make out, so here's what's behind that cover as per the Sony website. Now I just want to do a bit of a size comparison. So that's the RS3S there. This is the RS5. Weighs quite a bit more, although this wasn't really a lightweight thing, but still this is quite a bit more substantial. You can see the size difference there all round, just a bigger speaker. Bigger on output as well. The RS3S was quoted as having 100 watts output across the rear pair. These are 180 watts. I'm never going to crank it up anything like that. After all, it's only just over here. One thing with this nice rubbery base on here, it's unlikely to move around as much. This one I had to put some different rubber feet on it because it just slid all over the place. Now you might think, looking at this from the design of it, that it's just a black or charcoal coloured version of Sony's HT-A7000 speakers. It looks pretty much the same. The dimensions are different though, so whilst they look the same, these are smaller speakers than those used on the HT-A7000. But what I want to do first, before I unplug these, I'm going to go through this Dolby Atmos demo disc so that I can just test all the effects and see what it sounds like with the existing speakers, and then I'll sync these up, swap those out, and see if I notice any massive difference with the overhead effects. Right, so now I've got to go in the soundbar menu and connect them up. Right, so turn on the speakers, press the link button on the speakers, that's the one on the bottom. Now that's clever, my button's hidden with this thing. Looks like I've got to take this out before I can connect them up. Right, it's found them. Simple as that. Finish. Right, I'll just plug my power back in again, not that it's needed, I just want to keep things nice and neat. And then I can get it in the position that I want it to be in when I set it up, which is around about there, I think. Right, so I've done the same on the other side, everything's ready to go, let's press start. Okay, let's take another run through these demos. Right, now I wasn't expecting that. I was quite happy with these things, but those make a big difference. There's a few things in there. Well, first off, let's just talk about the height aspect with the speaker on the top. Yeah, I noticed the extra stuff up here and sort of floating about and perhaps bouncing off the wall a little bit, although the speakers are pointing forwards. I've got to bear in mind that the room I'm in if I stand up, I can touch the ceiling with my fingers. It's around about sort of, I don't know, 8 foot perhaps. I'm 6 foot tall. So not a massive ceiling, not very high up, not a vaulted ceiling. Probably perfect for this kind of thing, really. So if it didn't work here, it won't work anywhere. And it does work here. In addition, though, to those extra height effects, which really kind of balance things out from front to back, the bass is more pronounced here. I mean, the frequency response as a whole, from a low note up to a high note, it seems to be a fuller sound compared to the old ones. And I'm not surprised with that, given the size of the things. I think there's a bigger driver in here. I went online looking to see if there was a frequency response mentioned, comparing the old ones, or I should say, the RS3Ss. They're not old because you can still get them to the RS5s. Nothing, you know, they're keeping it very vague. They're mentioning that this one has more amplifiers in it, 3 compared to 1 in the old one. Whatever they've done with it, basically, this is a better sounding speaker, and it's more in keeping with the sound of the whole thing. I never really noticed before, because of course there isn't always that much coming out of the back of this thing, but when you play these demos, they throw a lot of sound around the room, and that's where you notice it, where they send things from the front to the back and over the top. It feels like it belongs more at the back than it did before, if you know what I mean. Except there is that issue that when it comes to actually watching movies or watching TV, very few things are really throwing stuff up in the air up here. So that's always an issue with anything like this. If you get a demo disc out, you'll be very impressed, and then you'll just be watching the telly, and most of the time you won't notice anything's going on. It's only when you watch the occasional movie, and then even just some of the more explosive blockbusters, and there'll be certain scenes in them where there's things that impress you, but for the vast majority of it, it's just like people talking, they're on the centre speaker, and there's just a little bit of stereo stuff going on. It's not often that there's something happening back here, but when it does happen, if the director chooses to send some audio back here, it'll work perfectly with this. But there's one feature that I definitely won't be needing, and that's the rechargeable battery. I'll just be keeping these speakers plugged in all the time. Of course, they go into standby when the soundbar is turned off, and they wake up within a fraction of a second of you turning it on. But I just don't need a battery in a speaker at the back here. I can see that it's a clever idea, that if somebody wants to just get a speaker out for a movie night, plonk it down somewhere and put it away when they don't need it. But that's going to be a very small minority of the users of these. The rest of us are just going to be plugging it in all the time. And I really hope that doesn't shorten its lifespan, because of course just keeping a battery on charge all the time isn't always the wisest of ideas. Now, when I did the review of this soundbar, there was a lot of people that were like, oh, soundbars, why'd you get a soundbar? Soundbars are rubbish. You want separates, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, fair enough, if that's what they want, cool. But I wanted a soundbar for a number of reasons. But you've got to also bear in mind, not all soundbars are created equal. Just because they have the word soundbar on them doesn't really mean that there's much comparison between some of them. For example, you could get a £40 Goodman soundbar from B&M Bargains, or this £1,200 or £1,300 one from Sony. But if you're interested, the reason I bought a soundbar, well, it's all to do with space. You see, I got a bigger television. But as a result, the gap between the TV and the side here, and the other side, because it's in an alcove, too narrow to fit my old speakers in. They had speaker stands before, and the speaker would have come here across the television, so I'd have to replace all the speakers. Now, of course, you could get some sort of speaker and mount it on the wall, but that is a long way back there, and this TV screen would baffle anything that was coming from there. And this space I've created in front of the TV is perfect for this particular speaker. Nothing is obscured. Side beam tweeters can point out of here at either side without any problem. Centre speaker in the middle. I wanted a proper centre speaker, not a phantom one, as in the Sony HT-A9s. Loads of people ask why I didn't buy the HT-A9s. Well, I wanted a real centre speaker. I needed an extra HDMI with the 120 Hz in 4K in here. And also, I didn't want any white speakers up on the wall, because I've got a nice dark wall behind this. And if I put them back there, they would have been baffled anyway, and I didn't have anywhere to put them either side. So this is the one that I wanted. Now, you might think about the stereo speakers. I think that's the left channel there, right one round about here somewhere. They might be a little bit too close together, but from my seating position, if I was to close my eyes and listen to a stereo test, and I had to point where the left and right speakers were, I'd place them somewhere around about a foot or so either side of this screen, which is exactly where I would have put the speakers anyway if I could have done. So it doesn't make any difference to me. Now, if you had an HT-A9, you could get those separate speakers and you had a massive room and you could space them out. Well, yeah, you'd have a wider soundstage, but I don't have that. I've got this little alcove here, and this is just perfect. if you see in a brochure, you get the perfect room. It'll be a nice big glossy square. You got a speaker on stands at each corner. The couch is in the middle of the room somewhere. All this stuff is something to be aspired to. But for most people, their houses don't look like that. They've got their house as it is at the moment, and then they want to put some kind of surround system in. That's where a soundbar comes in handy. And another thing that comes along with these especially is, more often than not nowadays, have some kind of wireless ability. Previously, I used to have 2 wires running under the carpet to 2 speakers. Well, as it is now, I've effectively got 4 speakers at the back. I'd have to have another 2 wires running under there for the upfirers. But with this, just connect it up, sorted, no problem. I intend to rip the carpet out of here, put a nice wood flooring down. I don't really want to be running wires under that. So there's situations where these things are more appropriate. And besides which, when I had the previous system with the speakers either side of this and the proper speakers at the back all wide in, it didn't create as a convincing soundstage, a 360-degree soundstage as this thing does. After all, this also has additional upfirers at the front, and it has these side beam former things. Well, I couldn't even have speakers at the side halfway across the room. I'd be tripping over the wires to them. So yeah, there's situations that are suitable for one person, maybe not for another. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people now are just looking for positive affirmation that they've made the right decision. So if they bought a product, they'll go looking at a review of it, and then if the person reviewing it has a slightly different opinion to them, then that reviewer is wrong. It's a very strange way to behave. I mean, I've bought cars in the past that all reviewers seem to hate. I liked, but I never went on the reviews and said, your review's wrong. It's a different opinion. Different horses for different courses, you know. Anyway, talking about this HT-A7000, my experience with it over the last 8 months or so, it's worked flawlessly. The only problem is the LG television, well, that's done a firmware update at one point, and the EARC stopped working. Which meant the audio wasn't coming through the soundbar automatically. The idea was you're supposed to just turn the telly on, soundbar comes on, everything was automatic. It worked like that initially until LG did a brilliant firmware update and ruined it. Fortunately, since then, they've done some more firmware updates and kind of half fixed it. More often than not, the soundbar will automatically come on now. Occasionally, I have to press the on button myself. It's not the biggest hurdle in the world, but yeah, it's a shame when things like that happen because everything was working perfectly. As far as the sound quality goes, absolutely no issues with it whatsoever. In fact, during those moments when the soundbar hadn't come on and the TV sound was coming through the speakers, it was really noticeable. I could not go back to that sound quality again now. And that was one of the reasons, again, I bought a soundbar rather than the AV system I used previously, in that it was all automatic. Anytime anyone turned the telly on, the sound was going to come on rather than having to switch on an AV amp and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm happy with the way it sounds. I wouldn't recommend it as far as the value goes. It's not a value proposition. If you want to save money, don't buy any of this stuff. It's expensive, and I kind of wish that that original speaker I bought, well, the new one had been available at the same time, and I would have paid the difference instead rather than having to buy 2 sets of speakers. But I mean, I could sit here sulking about it, or I could get the new speakers and be happy with them, and I am happy with them. And I'm looking forward to hearing some more things through them. Okay, now I was going to leave it there, and then I realised I haven't really experienced a proper movie with this. I've gone through a demo disc, but of course those things are always designed to show things off to the best ability. So I made the effort this afternoon to take a bit of time off from what I was going to be doing, and I sat down and I watched a movie. I went and had a look what was on Disney Plus, and there was the latest Doctor Strange movie in there, which I hadn't seen. Not really my cup of tea, but it seemed like it might be the right kind of thing to watch. I mean, it's 4K, it's got Atmos effects, all the rest of it. So I sat down here, and whilst the film didn't grip me as such, the surround effects were very impressive. That was what I was looking for, really. But there were certain scenes in there where they really utilised the full system as far as the bass notes go, the subwoofer, all the way to the surrounds, and the height effects. There was a section around about 35 minutes in where they're kind of jumping through different multiverses, and each one of those had its own soundscape. And some of those had things flying above your head and kind of underwater type sounds with water bubbling and things. Very impressed with the whole thing. I think it's a step up considerably from my previous system. One thing that I've noticed particularly, it seems very well balanced. The tones across the whole thing, rather than it going from sort of big speakers at the front to a little speaker at the back, where you might just think, oh, well, these are just first surround effects. It feels like the whole thing is cohesive now. And if you get a big bass note at the front in the subwoofer and through the speakers over there, you'll also get it through the back, whereas I think that might have been lacking a little bit before. So overall, I'm very impressed. Now, the thing with these speakers is, with them being bigger, I'd imagine they'd be better for music. So I thought, well, what can I test that out with? Of course, most music's just going to come out the front. Well, I did recently get the Madman Across the Water box set, which came with a Dolby Digital 5.1 and DTS 5.1 Blu-ray. So I popped that in, and that sounded perfect as well. Couldn't fault this thing at all. I'm very happy with it. You've got to bear in mind one thing, that I'm a bit of a movie buff, more the movie experience of watching them at home though. As long back as I've ever been able to earn a wage, I've spent a good proportion of it on buying VHS, and then DVD, then Blu-ray, then UHD Blu-ray, various streaming services, getting bigger and bigger televisions, different surround systems over the years. It's probably been my number one hobby, really, for most of my adult life, sitting watching movies. There's nothing I enjoy more than watching a good movie at home. I'm saying this because this is an expensive setup. For me, this makes sense to spend a lot of money on some speakers to upgrade things slightly. For a lot of people, it wouldn't do. But what I'd say is, if you had an HT-A5000 or HT-A7000, or you were getting one, and you were thinking of getting the surround speakers to go with it, and you didn't know where to get the RS3Ss or these RS5s, in my opinion, I would save up for the RS5s. I think they're worth the difference. They really fill out the whole system, and to me, they're a big improvement. Let's stop this video because I could keep doing this end bit forever and never get to the point, and the point is, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.